Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome in. Today, we've got a truly powerful guest joining us, Adrienne Caldwell, the author of the raw and unforgettable memoir, Unbroken, Life Outside the Lines. Adrienne is a survivor advocate, wife, mother, and Houston native who's turned unimaginable childhood pain into a story of fierce resilience and hope. Born into a military family overshadowed by her mother's untreated schizophrenia, Adrienne endured emotional and physical abuse, neglect, traumatic foster care placements, and the heavy weight of being her baby brother's primary protector at a heartbreakingly young age. Her book doesn't shy away from the darkness, poverty, violence, institutional failures, addiction struggles, but it shines with an unbreakable inner light that refused to be extinguished. Through education, self-reclamation, and sheer determination, Adrienne broke cycles that statistics say are nearly impossible to escape. Less than 3% of foster youth go to college. Yet she did. Now she's a Firebird Book Award winner, a voice for trauma recovery, mental health awareness, and the long, quiet arc of healing. Her story is heartbreaking, hopeful, and deeply human, reminding us that we're not defined by what breaks us, but by how we rise. Adrienne, thank you so much for being here, trusting us with your story. Welcome to Uncle Jimmy's podcast.
Thank you very much, Jimmy. That was quite the introduction.
Thank you.
I am honored and humbled to be your guest, and thank you for giving my voice a platform. So
That's what it's
thank
all
you
about.
very much.
That's what it's all about. So let people know, Adrienne, right, who you are. And, I know you were talking about some things before we started. So just let the guests know, and then we'll get into the questions and all that, and we'll have a great conversation.
So this can serve as kind of an overview and also trigger warnings, but I have either witnessed or personally experienced the following: the sexual assault of a young girl, the drowning death of a child, emotional and physical abuse, extreme poverty, mental illness, homelessness, horrifically abusive foster care, bulimia, drug and alcohol addiction, pedophilia, death, suicide, and incest. So there really isn't much that I can't relate to in one way or another.
And that's powerful, right? It speaks to everything that you've, in this short time on earth that you've experienced, whether it's done to you or you've witnessed it, right? It's crazy to think all those things that you said, right? That you've had to take in, right? Whether it was you or witnessing it. So, we're going to dive into it and we're going to get into some great questions here. But before we start, right, let people know, because you've written a book, right? Where can they find the book? And I'm gonna ask you that many times throughout, because I always like to let people know about the book, where they can find it and where they can find you.
Thank you. So Unbroken Caldwell is my social handle. I'm on Facebook, Insta, LinkedIn, and it's also my website. And I like to encourage people to visit because the book, Unbroken, Life Outside the Lines, is the firsthand account of the trauma that I've endured, survived, overcome. But I post my Children's Protective Services case file, just hundreds of documents that include psychiatric evaluations, therapist notes, caseworker, social worker notes. It goes through my entire introduction to Children's Protective Services, how it came about, along with letters that I wrote when I was 16 years old, and my best friend, Joshua Murray, he kept them. He kept them for 30 years. So I've scanned those photos, but what the case file does is it provides a clinical perspective. So students of psychology, counseling, anybody wanting to be a therapist, it's the juxtaposition of the two. And I've made that available on my website, and there will eventually be a companion text for students in the classroom, and it'll be Unbroken, the case file. I was very creative when I named that the case file. So, yeah. And Amazon, Barnes & Noble, I'm hoping to get in-store placement with Barnes & Noble. I don't, I can hope. But yeah, all the major book retailers, the book will be available beginning Tuesday, March 7th.
Oh, perfect. So it comes out March 17th. I'm excited. Because I was just going to say, after the interview, I'm going to have to go on and grab the book, but I'm going to have to go on I was on the website earlier, so I'm going to have to pre-order the book so I can get a copy when it comes out, because I'm excited. I like
My
to, and then we can bring you back on after, right? And we can talk about the book sales and how everything's going. So I'm excited. I'm excited, Adrienne. I'm excited for you. And I'm like I said, I'm privileged and I'm honored to have you on. We're going to treat you with respect and honor here. And
Thank
like I
you.
said to you before when we started, at any point in time, if you want to stop, we can stop, because this is all about you telling your story. So at any point in time, if that does happen, just let me know and we can stop.
Thank you. Thank you
Okay.
very much. Quick note, my publisher's uploading the final file, so it's actually not appearing yet. But on Tuesday, I'm doing a Facebook live stream at 1 o'clock and 7 o'clock Central. So if you want to show up there, I would love to have you as a guest.
Perfect. That's March 17th at what time?
1 and 7 Central.
Central
So
Time. Perfect.
2
Yeah.
and
I'll
8.
be and I'll be sharing that out on my social media so everybody can get that and they can go check it out because I'm excited. I'm excited for the book. So
Awesome.
Adrian, let's
Thank
hop
you.
into some questions, right?
Yeah, go for it.
What was the moment in your childhood, right, when you first realized your family dynamic wasn't normal? And how did that realization hit you as a kid?
Sure. I was in the 5th grade. I know this moment distinctly. I was in the 5th grade. My mother had just beaten me. And after a beating, she would always send me to go take a shower. And I had this ritual where we didn't have a full length mirror in the house. And I would stand on the toilet and I would just look in the mirror and see what damage she had done. And then I would get in the shower. And I remember just thinking to myself, how on earth do kids with 2 parents survive? Like, my mind in the 5th grade was just boggled. Like, if this is what I'm going through with 1 parent, how are they surviving 2 parents? Like it didn't occur to me growing up that not having a father, that I was missing something. It never worked like that. And I knew from the time I was probably 5 years old that my mom was not normal. There was something wrong with her. And it affected our relationship because as a snotty 5-year-old who thinks she knows everything, I had contempt for my mother, and they would act out in ways that nobody else in my family saw. I was this perfect little blonde-haired, pigtailed, sundress angel to everyone else, but I was cruel to my mother. And yeah, from 5 years old, I knew there was something wrong. And in the shower, I would talk and say, "Why am I the one that has to engage with this? Why was I selected to have her for a mother? Why me?" And yeah, 5th grade.
Fifth grade. So that must have been tough, right? Since the age of 5 to, fifth grade when you start seeing it and you're looking in standing up on the toilet, looking in the mirror and saying to yourself, something's wrong here, right? Something's not right.
Absolutely.
So you describe, right, being your baby brother Joshua's main caregiver at such a young age. How did that role shape your sense of responsibility and love, even amid the chaos that was going on in the house?
I acted more as his mother than our mother did. She would be away in another room for hours and hours, and I fed him, I changed his diaper, I took care of him. When we were homeless, living in the Salvation Army shelter, there were 2 beds in the room. We actually pushed them together, and it would be my mother, my brother, and then me, and we would hold hands. And the shelter made us leave every day from 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. And this was summer in Houston. So we're talking regularly 100 degrees or hotter. And I remember just seeing the heat waves emanating off the road and the sidewalk. And we would just walk for hours and she would lead and I would hold his hand and we just walked and walked to nowhere. We had nothing to do. We had nowhere to go.
So you were just waiting to go back to the shelter at 3. Yeah.
Exactly. One time, a guy walked up to us and he gave us a pizza. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. Like, here I am in this miserable experience, and some random stranger just showed us kindness that I was not used to. My grandfather was Navy, retired Navy. And I grew up with the notion that if you're family, I will take care of you. I will help you. If you're anybody else, you can take a long walk off a short pier. So, yeah. And my mother, when she was pregnant with my brother, she and I would walk the neighborhood. We lived with an aunt and uncle, their rental house, and we would walk, and she would tell me that she was going to have to give him up for adoption, that she couldn't keep him. And here I was, 9 years old, begging her to keep
Keep,
him, to
yeah.
keep the baby. And she talked to me not as a child, but as an adult. She needed someone to talk to about it.
Yeah.
She was struggling with it, and ultimately she did keep him, obviously. But I mean, from before he was born, I was taking care of him and advocating for him.
Yeah.
And when she would get frustrated and angry with him, I would literally use my body to go in between so that she would hit me, not him.
You'd be the barrier. Eh,
Exactly.
and that must have been tough, right? As a young kid, 9 years old, and you're advocating for mom, right? You got to you got to keep my brother, right? You got to keep him. You can't give him away. And that's 9 years old, right? And
Yeah.
so that gets to my next question, right? So looking back now that you're older, and how has understanding your mother's untreated schizophrenia, does it change the way you view her actions and the pain that she caused?
It didn't occur to me until I was in my 20s, and it was an epiphany when it did occur to me that she was sick. She was not well, and somebody somewhere should have gotten her help. But that's not what we did in our military family. We put one foot in front of the other. You keep your mouth shut. Everything gets swept under the rug. You just move forward. And my family is like that to this day.
Yeah, you pretend everything's okay, right?
Absolutely. And I interviewed my uncle, which is on my website as well. And he told me at the end of it, he said, you can just keep your book at your house, saying he didn't want that at his house. He didn't want to talk about it. He didn't. I was shocked when he agreed to be interviewed because he talked so rarely about what it was like. And I should mention that my grandfather was schizophrenic. In fact, I've seen his DD 214, and one of the discharge reasons was listed as schizophrenia.
Okay.
So you would think that somebody would have gotten at least my mother some help. And I have a cousin who is schizophrenic too, like present day schizophrenic. So there's this generational mental illness that's just been handed down, and they're using the same solution, head down, move forward to not solve the problem. And I had the opportunity after 10 years of not seeing my mother, after a decade of not seeing her, I had the chance to visit her in El Paso. And I did. And she had a social worker. She was on medication. In fact, she had her pill box on her dining room table. And she was doing so well. She had a government apartment, but there was furniture. It wasn't like when we lived in government housing. And she would just sit and watch court TV and smoke her cigarettes, but she was doing so well. And I got to see that. I'm the only person in my family that got to see my mother like that.
And how did that
She,
feel?
it was amazing. We talked, but I didn't need her to be my mom anymore. My Aunt Rose filled that role for
Yeah.
me. So I wasn't looking for like some ongoing deep maternal connection. I just wanted to see that she was okay. I could move on.
You can move on, yeah. Well, deep down inside, right? It's your mom. You want her to be okay, right? You don't want to see any harm come to
Absolutely.
her. But, so how long was the schizophrenia untreated for in your mom? How many years would you say?
She passed when she was 43. So, and we didn't talk in detail about it.
Yeah.
I think she was in her late 30s. She was staying in a homeless shelter in El Paso. And I think that's where she was first connected with a social.
Okay. So it took her a long time, right? And she only lived a couple more years later, right? After
Yes.
getting diagnosed. And, That's tough, right? That's tough because you finally probably see your mom, right, turning the corner and she's doing great, and then she passes away, right?
Death has been very prevalent in my life. My grandmother died when I was 7. My mom died when I was 21. My husband died when I was 35, and then my uncle and my aunt. So I probably had more experience with death than most people, and it's continued throughout my life. It's not like I turned 25 and ta-da, it was over. I was
Yeah.
widowed at the age of 35, which I don't discuss in the book. There may be a book 2. I'm not sure if I wanna write it. So,
Well,
honestly.
and we're gonna get into questions about the book, right? But this is, one that's off the top of my head as we're talking, right? How was it for you, right, to have to go back to those dark places, right, to write the book? Was that tough?
It was horrific. It was awful because the brain can't differentiate between trauma 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and present day. The brain doesn't make that distinguishment.
Yeah,
And I am, like, expert level at repression. So all of my traumas, I say that I put them in a metaphorical box that went on a metaphorical shelf behind a metaphorical door, and writing Unbroken forced me to take each box out and open it up and look at it and relive it. And honestly, it's a hard book to read. I've gotten that feedback, and I've also been told that sometimes I appear as if I'm the villain and that I should change that
yeah,
because I might lose readers. And my answer was no, I'm not doing that. I did bad things, I hurt people, and I'm not going to portray myself otherwise.
yeah, yeah. You're telling
So
the story how it is, the truth, right?
absolutely, and it's hard to hear.
Yeah,
There
and
are
some people,
points where people have shut down,
yeah,
where 2 very close friends told me that they had to stop reading, and I said, "That's okay.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
okay."
Yeah. Yeah, because for you almost, right, when you're writing the book, it's almost a release of, not of the traumas, but, you're releasing it pen to paper and, a lot of times when people write books, it's for themselves, right?
It was incredibly cathartic. Now that I'm 6 years into it,
Yeah.
I can say that,
Yeah.
but it took me 5 years, and my husband desperately wants me to be done with the
Done with
book.
it.
Yeah, because, he wants his happy, teary, rah, 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 Adrienne, not the I just revisited, my mother's mental illness and beatings,
Yeah.
Adrienne. So, uh, but yes, it was ultimately something that I don't know if I would do it again.
Yeah.
Not sure, but it's been very cathartic.
So the next question, right? The foster care system, it plays a big role in your story. What are some of the biggest ways it failed you and other kids? And what small moments of humanity stood out?
There were no moments of humanity.
Yeah.
I went to live with in the book, I call her the witch from hell, except with a B, and she is referred to as TBF, and it wasn't physical or sexual abuse. It was psychological, emotional abuse, and I'll share a couple remarks that she made, and you can start to get an idea of this woman. So, I was trying on swimsuits one time. I was probably 14, 15. And I came out to show her, and she looked me up and down, and she said, "Your thighs are fat. I'm surprised you haven't started throwing up to lose weight." And that started a battle with bulimia that continues to this day.
Yeah.
So the next time was when I was first diagnosed at 15 with major depressive disorder. And I was put on medication, and I thought that that meant I was defective, that I was damaged goods. And I went back to her house. I took my razor apart and I cut my wrists. And when she saw it, her response was, "You didn't even do it right. You're supposed to cut along the vein, not across it." So this woman, I wish I had another word, but evil.
Yeah.
Uh,
Pure
just
evil.
and that is difficult for me to comprehend because I think people are generally good. They don't set out to harm others and hurt others. People make I think people make the best decisions they can at the moment with the information they have. But what she did to us foster kids, I mean, we had to sit on the floor. We were treated the same as animals. The last foster girl to bathe, she had one full bathroom. The last foster girl to bathe had to clean the tub with a bleach cleaner before her family would use it. We had separate dishes, separate silverware, separate food. It was just our inferiority was ingrained
Yeah.
into us. And my schizophrenic mother, who beat me regularly, I've never had a nightmare about her. But TBFH, I still have nightmares about
Nightmares
her.
about her. Yeah.
Yes.
And
And I wake up just crying. And my most recent was 3 months ago.
yeah.
So, and I repressed all of that, and I really didn't start to get into it until 6 years ago when I started going through my Children's Protective Services case file, and I was reading the documents and the lies that she wrote, and I just got overwhelmed with rage, and I reached out to lawyers, to the state, to the county. I wanted first to make sure that she wasn't still a foster parent, and second, to tell them what she did. And I wanted some sort of consequence for
Yeah.
what she did to me. And everyone basically said, "You're too late." And that's one of the reasons that I started writing,
Yeah.
so that she could be held accountable.
So you're essentially being victimized, right? Every day.
Yes, absolutely.
You're supposed to be in a home that, with caretakers that are supposed to care for you and love you and take care of you, and here you are, and I don't mean I don't mean this as a joke. I'm being serious. You were probably better off being with your mom, right? Walking the streets with the pavement being 100 degrees than being in that home, right?
At least she loved me.
Yeah, yeah, because it's just unacceptable, right, for the state to even have caretakers like this that are abusing children, right? Because it's the foster care. Everyone. I think everyone seems to think the foster care is this great thing, which it can be, right? But I've heard a lot of cases, a lot more bad cases than there are good cases. Like simply people just taking the kids for a paycheck, right? They get their money and they don't worry about the kids. And
And I don't think there's anything inherently wrong, and there are too many families out there or foster parents out there. We can't get rid of those people, but if they're decent people and they treat the kids well, then okay, fine. They're doing it for a paycheck. They get as many kids as they can, for whatever size home they have, whatever the state will allow. But the alternative is a group shelter. And I can tell you from having lived in a shelter, and that's why I never spoke up, because that was my alternative. There weren't other foster homes for me to go to. But what people don't realize, so the statistics are out there that, the 3% of foster kids go on to college, but there are others, like 1 in 5 US prisoners. So 20% of the US prison population, they're former foster kids. And 7 out of 10 girls, by the time they're 21 years old, will have had a child. So 70% of female foster kids are having babies. And that just starts the cycle over again.
yeah, exactly.
They haven't learned healthy parenting skills. They didn't get anything from their parents. And here they are with the baby by 21. Well, one or more. So it's just, and the system is so flawed. The foster parent that I lived with, she didn't work for the state. My social worker didn't hold her accountable. My foster parent, CBFH, worked for a for-profit company. They contracted out to a for-profit company. And there are just so many things wrong with that. They're making money off of foster kids. That's their business model.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think a lot of that, right? The states themselves too. You see it with prisons, with hospitals, mental health hospitals. They've all gone away from the local and state hospitals to for profit now, right? And for profit to me, nobody's, I mean, I'm lucky enough. I'm here in Boston where we have the best hospitals, the best care, in the nation. And I see it day to day, but I can only imagine, right? The amount of, kids that fall through the cracks. Those numbers that you just gave me, 70% of foster girls pregnant by the age of 21. having a child by 21, like you said, all that does is just restart the cycle, right? It just restarts it to be traumatized and re-victimized, especially at 21, and then 20% of kids in prison, right? It's just mind blowing, right? And there has to be a solution, right? There has to be a solution to that.
Until we prioritize our children, and that involves accountability, involves paying for them, providing for them. Until we prioritize our children, it's just not going to happen, and the
Yeah.
cycles will just continue.
Well, I say it all the time, right? When you see it quite often now with school shootings and all that, and people get up in arms and they get mad, and I say, look, we had a Sandy Hook where the kid went in and killed kindergarteners and first grade kids, and nothing was done, right? What does that show you about the state of our country, where kids can be executed and killed in school and nobody cares, nobody bats an eye, no laws changed, there's nothing done, right? So it continues today. That's my message to those down in Washington, that they need to get their heads out of their asses, stop worrying about a goddamn war in Iran that we should have nothing to do with, and worry about the kids here at home, the veterans, the kids, they deserve an opportunity. They deserve a better chance. And it's sad to hear those statistics. So, Adrienne, how was becoming a mother yourself influence the way you process and talk about your own childhood trauma?
It's a great question, Jimmy. So I have an attachment disorder, early onset reactive attachment disorder. My daughter was born August 7th, but it wasn't until November 8th that I made the decision that I was going to parent her, be her mother, and give her the childhood that I didn't have. In 3 months to and during that time, I was telling my husband, his parents were over. I was telling my husband, "Take her, go raise her with your parents. I can't do this." And in my psychiatric evaluation that's on my website, Unbroken Caldwell, it's the second psychiatric evaluation. And one of the lines reads, "Adrienne is terrified of having children because she's afraid that she will do to them what her mother did to her."
Yeah.
So it changed everything in my life. November 8th is my sobriety date. I woke up hungover in the bathroom on the floor mat on November 8th, and that was the day I decided to parent my daughter.
Your daughter, yeah.
And I I quit drinking, I stopped self-medicating, I got my act together when it came to a career. I entered financial services and ultimately became a woman that I thought she could respect. And remember, I didn't have role models to teach me parenting.
Yeah. Growing up, yeah.
So I basically I didn't do a perfect job, but she had a hell of a better childhood than what I experienced.
Yeah, and I just wanna
So
say I'm proud of you, right, getting sober and everything you've been through, right, and being able to be that, light, that shining light for your daughter, right? Being able to give her that childhood that you never had, right? And getting sober. And, it must have been tough in those couple months dealing with that, right? And trying to process it all, especially everything you had been through, right? Because like you said, your family, it's almost generational cycles, right? Where
it is.
everything gets passed down. So it's one of those where it's probably running through your head, right? I don't want to be like my mother, but what happens if I am? And it must have been so tough, right? I can only imagine what some of those days were like, right? And
Yeah,
and you came through it. So resilience, right? Resilience is a word that comes up a lot around your story, right? What does true resilience look like to you beyond just surviving?
true resilience. I would say it's being able to be happy, to feel light, to feel joy, to yeah, that's how I define resilience. And it's not being an example for other people. I don't have a playbook on how to overcome trauma. And I don't propose any solutions in Unbroken because I don't have 'em. I
Exactly.
just tried things until they were doing more damage to my life than helping, like drinking, and kind of went through it doing everything wrong. I am so sorry. That should not have happened. Doing everything wrong until something right worked.
Yeah. Yeah, and you got it, you got it. You got it right. And you're on the path and you're doing great. The book's coming out March 17th, and I'm excited. I'm excited for you. You know, and you've spoken, right? You've spoken about compassion emerging from your pain. And how did you move from anger or bitterness toward forgiveness, especially for family members?
Family members, there was a reason. My mother was sick,
Yeah.
and that I can forgive. It's people like the witch from hell that, in fact, she is the only person in my life that I am still trying to forgive. I have not forgiven her. That only hurts me. It's not hurting her.
Yeah.
She has no idea how I feel. She doesn't care.
He doesn't care. Yeah, exactly.
But I'm holding on to something that's causing me pain and anger and sadness. And I just imagine what a relief it will be when I can say that I feel about her the way I do about my mom.
Yeah.
But I can't find the reason.
Yeah.
Surely there must have been some trauma in her past for her to feel the need to denigrate the kids placed in her home.
In our home. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not saying it's easier, right? But it's your mom. It's your mom that you forgave because it is your mom, right? And it's one of those things where this lady's an outsider. She's not family. She did take you in, but she didn't treat you like family, sure as hell, right? It's not like
Mm-mm.
it's not like you went in there and she was great and awesome and something happened with you and another foster child, right? Something happened between you and her and the other foster children. So it's one of those where it's on your time, right? To forgive her. But like you said, the hardest part is it's not hurting anyone else but yourself, right?
Yes.
You know? And one day, right, you may forgive her, you may not. But again, it's talks like this and in your book, per se, that you're getting it out where people can see what this lady did to you. And it's not one of those things where people are gonna be like, no, she wasn't that bad of a lady. No, she was a piece of shit, you know? You don't do that to kids, right? It's so frustrating. Like, I don't even know the lady and I just want to take her and choke her myself, because I'm just
Thank
like,
you.
can't do that to kids, right? So, Adrienne, how has sharing your story publicly, right, through your book, podcast, and talks affected your own healing process?
I don't think it has because I I write as Adrienne Caldwell. That's my maiden name.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting once the book is out and to see if I get any feedback or comments. I am so terrified of the trolls because like I said, I don't portray myself in the best light at all times in the book. So I know there's going to be criticism and, jumping on the bandwagon to say how bad I was.
Yeah, pile on, right?
Yeah, but I haven't experienced that yet. So I'm kind of like bracing for it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, one of those things too, right? And the hottest thing is that you're always going to have people trolls, right? You're always going to have people that are going to talk negatively about you and at you, right? Instead of speaking with you. And you have to realize, right? These people, most of them are coming from a place that they're hurt, right? I used to always use the analogy, hurt people, right? And
Exactly.
it's tough though, right? Because here you are, putting this story out as a cautionary tale, right? To people. You talk about the foster care, you talk about how your mom and, there's so many topics in there that you hit on, right? Mental illness, right? That people can learn from, right? And be in a position where they can say, hey, my mom wasn't acting right. Maybe she has a condition, right? We got to go get her checked out. And, this isn't the way the foster care should be. Maybe the state should look into these for-profit foster homes, right? Foster companies that are making money off the backs of kids that aren't getting fed and taken care of correctly, right? And put things in place where, a checklist where if they come in and they say, oh, well, they're doing this to this kid, okay, you're out of it. You're not getting paid anymore, nor are you able to have kids, but also you're going to be prosecuted, right, to the fullest extent of the law.
that would be phenomenal. I can tell you that I don't know if this is accurate or not, but I heard that one of her foster girls committed suicide and that she had her license revoked. I don't know if this is true,
Yeah.
but it's what I heard.
Yeah.
And I believe it.
I was going to say, you've been there, you lived through it. So just imagine, what that girl was going through in that time of, darkness. And that brings us right to my next question. So for listeners who might be in the dark place right now, right? What's one piece of advice you'd give them about holding on to hope when everything feels hopeless?
Piece of advice. Hold on. Just
Yeah.
hold on. Keep going. Make the best decisions you can, because the decisions you make today directly impact your tomorrow. And that pertains to drugs, to alcohol, to self-medicating, to hurting yourself. The decisions you are making today, right now, dictate the life that you're going to have
You're gonna
tomorrow.
yeah. So I got a couple more questions right before we end. So mental illness, right, in families, it's often shrouded in silence. What message do you have for people supporting loved ones with untreated conditions like schizophrenia?
Get them help. They need help. It's not their fault. They are not bad people. Do not judge them, and just be compassionate, because if somebody has cancer, we don't judge them. That may have been a bad example.
No, no, no.
Whatever.
I say it all the time, right? On our mental health, we do a Wednesday night mental health talk, me and a couple people online, Facebook and all that. And we say it all the time, right? When someone's going through cancer treatment, everybody's checking in on everybody. Hey, how you doing? How's treatment going? Right? But if someone down the street is dealing with schizophrenia or they're dealing with depression or anxiety, nobody comes up to you and says, "Hey, how's your anxiety today? How's your depression today?" Right? And what we're trying to do on Wednesdays with the talks that we have is we're trying to make it a common occurrence, right? Make it an everyday thing that it's okay to talk about mental health, because everybody shies away from it, right? The stigma of mental health.
It's a silent illness.
Yeah, in silence, I tell people will kill, right? Because nobody wants to. I used to say it, right, Adrienne. I used to be in rooms of like 500 people and I felt alone, right? And people were like, how could you feel alone? I said, you just don't know how the dark places that I was in, right?
I have depression rules from when I experience recurring depression. Eat at least once a day,
Yeah,
shower at least twice a week, sleep as much as you can.
yeah.
And if after 2 to 3 weeks you don't feel better, get help.
Get help, yeah. Yeah, that's key. I used to say it, right, Adrian, when I was going through it, I used to literally it was like a fear of the shower, right? I used to hate taking a shower. I say it, right?
It's
Like it
exhausting.
gives me the
When
chills,
you can't get out of bed, it's exhausting. Everything's exhausting. Making
everything.
food for yourself. That's why my best friend and I came up with the depression rules.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. So you describe an innate light, right, that refuses to dim. Where do you think that light comes from, and how can others nurture their own?
So I put a gun to my head and pulled the trigger twice. And that evening in the psych ward, I had this experience where I just felt calm and peace. And that was when I realized that I had a purpose on this earth and that I was not going to be released until I had served my purpose. And that experience, I've kept that with me. And I don't know if writing Unbroken was my purpose. I'm just going through my life trying to be as good of a person as I can. I say I was a bad person for the first half of my life. I try to be a good person and make up for it the second half of my life.
Yeah.
So, but that experience has stayed with me. And I can't explain it, but I know.
Yeah,
I
it's almost
know
like
there's a
divine intervention.
reason. You said it, not me.
Twice. Once is you're lucky. Twice is a divine intervention of saying, "Hey, you're meant to be here, right? Adrian, we need you here, right?" And still, like you said, your purpose may not be writing the book. Your purpose may be in advocacy, right? Your purpose may be in changing the laws when it comes to foster homes, right? You don't know. You don't know. You're still young. You still got so much fight left in you. You got so much. Even though your husband's not going to like that, so he wants you back to being yourself, and in which I can't blame him, right? But
Mhm.
you had to do this. You had to write that book, right? You had it in your head and you had to get it out. It's almost, I tell people, one of my biggest things is from my mind to pen to paper, right? And it gets out, right? And it feels great. You release it, and I can only imagine, right? Writing a book, right? about your life and your story. And it's powerful. It's powerful. And again, I appreciate you coming on and joining us. And people, the book is going to be coming out the 17th of March. And one last question, right? Looking ahead, what's next for you? More writing, advocacy work, or something else entirely? Or maybe just spending time with the husband?
Foster care is very near and dear to my heart, and if opportunities present themselves, I will advocate. And I don't know what's next. That's the beautiful thing about this life. I
Yeah.
don't know what's happening tomorrow, but I'm gonna find out.
So you learn to live in the present too, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the powerful thing. So here's the thing, right, Adrienne? I can make you a promise, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I'm going to do some digging, right, and see what we can do in Texas, and see what laws there are and what legislation there is, right, and see what we can do. See what we can do to actually kick the ball, kick the can down the road, and let's see what we can do. Let's see if we can make a change in the foster care system. Not just because of you, on behalf of you, but on behalf of all the kids, right? The kids that are currently going through it, the kids that have gone through it, that don't deserve that. So I'm going to do some digging, right? I'm going to look up some and see what we can do. Maybe we can start a petition. Then we can start going to the legislature down there. There's a lot of things that we can do. And I would love to do that in part with you, keep in contact, because I think sometimes people don't realize, right, when you come on these shows and podcasts, some people just do it just to do it, right? I do it because my big thing is I love change, right? I love people that have come on that tell their story, their resilience, their fight, right? And they're still here. Like you just said, it breaks my heart that you just said that, right? Twice. You tried to end your life, but you're still here. And that's the divine intervention of, whether you believe in God or not, or spirits or whatever you believe in, right? You're here for a reason. You're here for a purpose. So I want to make sure we do something with that, whether it's getting a campaign going for changes down there. I'm going to look into the for-profit foster homes and see what we can do, right?
That
I'm
would be
excited.
incredible.
Yeah.
That would be absolutely
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah. It's definitely something we can do, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we
And
can.
and we're going to do that because it's time for a change. It's time for, again, the precious things that we have on this earth are kids, right? Kids.
Yes.
Kids should never be taken advantage of. Kids should never be hurt. Kids should never be assaulted or neglected or I like to say it, and not that I like to say it, but one of the hottest things for me is thinking that this country that we come from is supposed to be the greatest country in the world, right? But we still have kids that go to bed hungry.
Yeah.
Right. We still go to bed with kids that live on the streets that are sleeping in cars. Right. If you're supposed to be the greatest country in the world, we should all be taken care of. There should be a roof over our head, food on the table. And again, Adrienne, I'm excited to do that, to look into that, see what we can do, start a writing campaign into the legislature down there. And I'm excited. Your story has lit a fire underneath my ass to make sure we can do some things and make some changes. So I really do appreciate you coming on. I really do. And sharing your story. It means a lot.
Thank you for having me. You're
Nope.
giving me a platform.
Yeah.
So thank you.
And as I like to say, it's our platform, right? It's yours, it's mine, it's the world's, because we're doing great things here. And so, Adrienne, I have to say, this conversation has been one of the most moving and real we've ever had on the show. You've taken pain that could have destroyed anyone and turned it into something powerful, a light for others who feel unseen, broken, or hopeless. Your courage in sharing the ugly truth alongside the quiet victories isn't just inspiring. It's a gift to every listener who's ever felt like their story doesn't matter or can't be redeemed. Thank you for trusting us with your voice, for reminding us that healing isn't linear, but it's possible, and for proving that no matter how far outside the lines life drags us, we can still come back whole, unbroken. You've got a forever fan in me, and I know our listeners will feel the same. Excuse me, I'm getting a little emotional. Keep shining that light. Keep telling your story and know that you're making a real difference, Adrienne. From the bottom of my heart, thank you, Adrienne. Stay unbroken and come back anytime because I like to say you're family now.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Wow.
you.
Wow.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to, kicking down some doors down there in Texas and changing some minds down there.
Absolutely.